I'm going to call this segment Unfettered for reasons that will become very obvious very shortly. Over the last 10 years, journalism has shamed itself. It went from reporting to opinion and entertainment, and now to activism. Now everyone has an agenda, and they're not afraid to show it. They're definitely trying to push narratives. That is a very dangerous place. And it's also important to separate two things. One is what the organizations want, right? So the corporation of CNN or New York Times or whatever, and they have their interests. And then you have the people who work for them who, yes, they want to keep their jobs, and to some extent they're going to promote the interests of their corporate masters. However, they also, especially this new generation, they come in with a lot of beliefs, ideas about how the world should be. And to the extent that these organizations allow it, it's not a bad idea to have them as the tip of the spear for journalism. It's a distraction. When we're fighting each other, no one is paying attention to who's running the thing, right? Who has the power, how these corporations, these media companies make money. They make money from political campaigns. That is a huge profit center. So when all of these politicians raise money from corporations, that money gets plowed right back in to advertising on CNN and all these other, local stations and newspapers. So they have an interest in keeping this thing going. And the more we're going at each other, the less we focus on the actual power structure. So this ideology that a lot of these reporters come in with is actually very advantageous to their corporate masters. So the more you have a race war, the less you have a class war. That's why when they look at someone like Bernie Sanders, these companies freak out. They do everything they can to sabotage the guy. And not that I agree with Bernie's solutions, but he sees a lot of the problems. And he is not someone they want threatening their empires. So, and I don't want to speak, I don't want to make it sound like empires, like they're plotting and planning. It's just the reality. All things seek to defend themselves, right? They all seek to protect their livelihoods, to stay in business, to be profitable. And once you have this thing rolling, you keep it rolling for as long as you can. And that's all they're doing. And if you have enough powerful entities doing that same thing, it sure looks very ominous and a lot like the millionaires and the billionaires and the corporations, like all that stuff. Yeah, it kind of looks like that. Another part of this journalistic failure is the willingness to lie, to push ideologies. There are different kinds of lies. I think some of the big ones are lies of omission, which is telling you the things that fit the narrative, not the ones that don't. And those lies over time weave a certain reality that gets people, marching on the Capitol or, doing all kinds of other protests or canceling people or God knows what else. It's to say irresponsible would be the kindest thing you could say. These are highly destructive things done over a long enough period of time start to degrade the society. So it's not just about the profession anymore. They're violating the basic reason journalism exists, which is the principle of the fourth estate, which is you've got the three branches of government, and then you've got this thing that's supposed to keep them honest. And I don't know that it can if it's so deeply distrusted or so divided that you only trust your half. And the fourth thing is they've abandoned empathy and very selectively also abandoned redemption. For example, if you're on the left, you are willing to, look at people in prison and say, hey, even murderers shouldn't be locked up for life. We should rehabilitate them. We should let them out. We should let them earn a living. Okay, great. Now, are they going to apply that same line of thinking to people they think did something unforgivable, like use the wrong pronoun? So the pronoun people can't ever work ever again. But the other people, the prisoners who may have murdered or raped or whatever else, they can go out because, everyone deserves a second chance. I mean, there's just no intellectual consistency. And the people on the right, same thing. It's like we really care about the babies. We care about the babies. And then, when it comes to social services and providing things, after the baby's born, babies, why can't they just start their own business? Why can't the baby open up its own social network and then go online and try to compete in the marketplace of ideas and babies. So there's a lot of very disingenuous stuff. And one of the most disingenuous examples was recently. So there's a new app called Clubhouse, and I'll explain it in a second. One of the reporters on there, Taylor Lawrence, she is, I would consider her one of the cancel culture type people. And I wouldn't be surprised if she was very central to the firing of this McNeil guy at the New York Times. But she accused Mark Andreessen, who is the founder of Netscape and now runs one of the biggest VC firms, Andreessen Horowitz. She accused him of using the R word. Now, when I saw that headline or tweet or whatever it was, I was like, the R word? I mean, I know what the F word is. I know what the N word is. I don't know what the R word is. So apparently that's the word retarded or whatever. Are you not allowed to say the word, even referencing the word? Anyway, had no idea this was a slur, but apparently what really happened is Mark never said that. And it was someone else introducing this Reddit forum. It's a whole other story, but basically they described themselves as, I think their slogan was, we can stay retarded longer than you can stay solvent, in reference to hedge funds. Anyway, it's so stupid. It's so silly. But this idea that this noble profession, they're word police, how far can you fall? How far can you fall as a profession? I remember in 2011, I wrote an article called The Journalist's Last Laugh. And the premise of it is that social media has empowered all of these media figures to somehow rise above their brands. So some of the reporters and writers, whatever, they're more famous than the publications. And also people bond with them much more easily. It's very hard to hug a corporation. You can't hug Pepsi. I mean, I suppose you could hug like a T-Mobile tower or something. Maybe never procreate again. But there are very few lovable corporations. And that certainly was happening with media figures. And a lot of them, as I predicted, started to leave and start their own ventures. And one of my predictions there is there's going to be more people doing that on behalf of corporations. And recently, Andreessen Horowitz announced that they're going to be bypassing the press. They don't like tech coverage because it's become so adversarial and so negative. And I get it. Look, even I have to control being overly critical of things because look, no one's perfect. And then there's the motivations that companies have. Yeah, they want a profit. They want less competition. All of us want that as individuals and as companies. Some have more power and they're exerting it. So I think because we're at that stage, there's this mindset that reporters need to be adversarial with these powerful entities, people with money, venture capitalists, technology companies. And Andreessen Horowitz, their claims also are that the reporters that are contacting them or writing about this stuff don't understand the technology, so they're not getting a fair shake. Now, how entertaining or interesting this is going to be, when startups do this, they're usually pretty good at it because they will find people, hosts, ways of presenting things that are entertaining. The model for it really is Bloomberg, because Bloomberg is a terminal leasing business. They rent a bunch of terminals to all of these corporations that do research on them. They also have an online version, and they provide all of this data to all of these companies. But they also have a huge media operation. So they're a news organization. They cover business, they cover politics, they cover, they have an opinion section. More companies could do this, but the tendency in corporations, and I've had a lot of interactions with corporate PR just because I was doing a lot of public-facing things with innovation and new products and businesses. Whenever you launch something like that, you need to get the message out, and you're going to need to talk to the gatekeepers, who are typically PR. PR is a very political beast. In a way, like lawyers, you know how when you try to do something in a corporation and you have to run it by a lawyer, if the lawyer says yes and something goes wrong, then they get in trouble. But if they say no, they could never get in trouble. So their incentive is misaligned. They're not getting any upside by saying yes. PR functions the same way. If you want to do something super creative or a little controversial or a little bit out of the box, good luck. You end up with this really watered down, bland, terrible output. It does not feel genuine. It does not feel honest. What people want now is real. And I'm trying to do something that is unfettered, that isn't beholden to anybody. But everyone in corporations is hamstrung when it comes to that, especially PR departments. One way they can differentiate, and this is probably the main way they can do it, is offering depth that just isn't available on social media or in regular media. They have the experts, they have the technologies, they have access to all of these corporate people, and just withholding that access and doing it themselves, that's a huge win. And if they get into the mechanics of the businesses or the technologies or the trends in a way that can never be done by outsiders who are just, sort of drive-by shooters of media, they're going to be able to keep people's attention. And I think the best analogy for that is Joe Rogan. Everyone is saying, everything has to be super short, super concise. If you can't get it out in 15 seconds, it's all over. Or these short, terrible segments on news programs where you have to speak in sound bites and no one listens, no one engages in real dialogue. It's just either a shout fest or everyone just sort of plays their part and does their talking head shtick. But Joe would sit down and have 3, sometimes 4-hour conversations with people who have depth in their field and an understanding that is very rare to get exposure to, whatever that is. It could be science, politics, nutrition, whatever. And people ate it up. There was so much demand for it. People would listen for hours and basically have no lives of their own just to listen to something that's in depth. It was refreshing and it broke all the rules. Here, there's an opportunity to do something similar, listening to practitioners. It won't probably attract a mass audience, but you don't need a mass audience. You need the right audience. And I think they will do that, and they'll be able to speak to the people who want to hear these messages. Entertainment is hard. It's really hard to be funny. It's really hard to be engaging, but it's not as hard to be passionate. And one thing that startups have as an advantage over corporations is they have a lot of passionate people. And that passion shows. And whenever people get in front of a camera or they get on a mic, you can tell there's life to these people. They're not dead inside like the corporate people who've been beaten down arguing with PR people. So I think there's an opportunity here, and I think they're smart enough to crack this nut. The good news is, and this is another one I kind of go back and forth on, what we're seeing is this demise of traditional journalism. I don't think people want to watch dumb talking heads. I don't think people want to watch unnuanced conversations, the kind of media we've been digesting. And that's why you see people seeking out podcasts and seeking out YouTubers and seeking out all these alternative thinkers and writers and podcasters. They're craving honesty. They're craving something that isn't basically a commercial or something to manipulate you, to get you to click or engage or get mad. Given the chance, they would defeat this broken system, broken model. But I think there's an unholy alliance that's starting to form between old media and new media and these technology platforms. The example is the impact cancel culture is having on independent voices. You're able to shut people down, and the people perpetuating that oftentimes are people who blog or work in traditional media. So they're essentially ousting their competitors from jobs. So these are upstarts who didn't need the New York Times stamp of approval on their resume or on their content in order to become successful. They did it on their own. But those people are stealing consumption time and audience from these traditional channels. So it kind of makes sense to cancel a whole bunch of independents. The other way this is happening is through force. So what's happening in Australia is really interesting. Facebook is facing off against the traditional media. So Rupert Murdoch owns a lot of media in Australia. That's where his empire originated. He influenced the government to say, hey, if Facebook and Google are going to link to our articles, they should be paying us. Now, I'm no fan of Facebook or Google and their business model, but that's insanity, because the entire premise of the entire internet is the ability to link to other places. Hyperlinking is the internet. So if you put a headline of an article and a link to the article, I don't see how that warrants getting paid. But now they're forcing them into negotiation. And I think there's been some agreement already. So Facebook and Google are going to start paying these traditional media companies. And I think that model is going to start spreading to other places. So they're kind of intertwining. Something similar happened when YouTube went from being rogue to being part of Google. So the original YouTube, and a lot of people don't remember this, was basically all stolen content. When Google bought it, these traditional media companies exerted a whole lot of pressure and threatened lawsuits. There may have even been lawsuits and settlements, but the idea was they had to, sort of like the Corleone family, they had to go legit. So they had to go from killing people in the back of the woods to showing everything on the books. That's what they're doing now. So they have this process to take down stuff. They have this automated thing that detects music and other things that might violate copyrights. That was part of the negotiation. That same process is happening with Facebook and hyperlinking and other parts of traditional media. I am rooting for the underdogs, in case you can't tell, because I want to hear more diverse voices. And when I say diverse, I don't just mean in terms of race and gender and all this stuff, because you could have a bunch of people that say the same exact thing of all, shapes, sizes, and colors, but really cultural, intellectual diversity, ways of looking at the world. Those are the things that matter, and those are the things that are at risk. And as I discussed in a previous episode, everyone has a price, and these companies have the money. So it's not improbable that a lot of these voices will be acquired and then the edges shaved off, or we might never hear them because it's too difficult to keep a YouTube channel alive because you're saying things that threaten the establishment in some way. And until then, all media should have a disclaimer, something like this. Warning, what you are about to read or watch may be biased. It comes from a private organization or individuals with unknowable interests. Verify all information using multiple independent sources. and we need to, unfortunately, do all the work ourselves. I mentioned Clubhouse earlier. Clubhouse is the hottest new social network. Clubhouse is sort of a chat line with strangers where nobody gets laid. It's basically an audio-based social network. The smart thing that they did is they did it invitation only. So someone who is trusted is inviting you who is also trusted by them, and so on. So this network gets built up, and the only way you can get into a room is if someone you know invites you into that room. And people are saying, well, it's going to compete with podcasting. I think it's something different. I think live conversation has a certain danger that doesn't exist with podcasting. Like, by the time you listen to the show, some things are going to be edited out because I took long gaps, or I said something stupid, or or found a less stupid way to say something stupid. It's a little bit trimmed up. But here, it's sort of like breakout sessions at a conference. If you have the main keynotes, think of those as podcasts that goes out to everybody. Now, you have breakout sessions. One room might have some marketing advice. Another room might have something technical. A third one might be professional development. Now you're in a smaller cluster and you can interact. You can raise your hand, ask questions, listen to a panel of people or an individual. It's really up to the organizer to decide. I see it more as a successor to conferencing. And what I'm wondering is, where did everyone find all this time? People who are on it are crackheads. I have gotten so many friends who not only invite me, they keep texting me, have you joined yet? Have you joined yet? What did these people do? Did they quit their jobs? Did they murder their families? How are they all of a sudden clearing all the stuff that used to take up time to be on Clubhouse? Now, what a lot of people don't realize is if you read the terms of service, it says when the pandemic is over, you are still legally obligated to be on Clubhouse at least 3 hours a day. Hey, listen, read the terms of service. So a bunch of reporters, of course, have gone insane. They're like, oh, we can't let this network be unfettered. So they are complaining that it lets information spread unchecked. There's no way to record live audio, and there's no way to track who said what. These people have gone insane. This is how they thought through the social credit system in China. They're like, okay, how do we record this? How do we track that? How do we attribute all this stuff? This is our reporters talking about it. You see it from their corporate hat, which is, hey, this thing is a threat because now it's going to suck all of these users into unfettered conversations. Hey, you can hear directly from Bill Gates, who's doing one tonight, instead of us writing a story about Bill Gates, and then we are still the gatekeepers to you accessing Bill Gates. Anything that threatens to eliminate them as gatekeepers is obviously a threat, and so they're going to position it that way. And then they're using the useful idiots to help them stop it, because people like Taylor Lorenz and some of these others, I think there was a similar article on Vice. The title on Vice was "The Problem with Clubhouse." All of these children are essentially doing the bidding of their employer while being made to believe they're on some righteous mission to stop some imaginary enemy that's going to be plotting something on Clubhouse. It's almost bizarre. I don't really understand how to wrap my brain around it. It's a pragmatic, anti-competitive act laundered through imbeciles who think they're doing something good. I've never seen anything like this before. And maybe there's a long history of useful idiots in professions who are overeducated, who do these things. But to my knowledge, this is the first. The startup guy, he tweeted, "These people are going to lose it when they hear about the telephone, because those things aren't recorded either." And that's the thing with Clubhouse. You invite who you want to invite. The room doesn't have to fill up with, neo-Nazis or like some crazy people, because these are participants you chose to allow. I was trying to make sense of the mindset here. Are these reporters just snitching tattletale babies? Is it just that? Or are they useful idiots that are serving the purpose of a surveillance apparatus? It's like, hey, government, track us. Hey, social platforms, track on behalf of government or on behalf of I don't know who. Or are they useless idiots who don't understand the basic concepts of privacy or choice or not being invited to something? There are some parties you don't get to join because you're a snitch and a tattletale. Some people don't want you there. Some people deal with that and others go telling their mom, and the mom calls the other mom and says, hey, little Stevie was not invited and I would prefer that he went to this party. And then you show up and no one wants you there. Or are they just cynical partisans? Like maybe I would almost prefer that. I would almost prefer that they're cynical operatives for a political movement, for a political party, where their goal is to use wokeness as a tool. And there are people who do that. But I don't know if these reporters are smart enough to know that their activism is actually them being useful idiots. There's also the possibility that they're just sniveling careerists and they realize that this is the way to move up, or at least they think this is the way. Because if the game is scoring woke points, and certainly we've created this type of game now, then this is a way to do it. So there are certain things you can write, there are certain things you can say, certain people you can cancel, certain positions you take against media that will win you those woke points. I'm not sure those points are worth very much. They seem to be now, but I think that there's no pleasing people who are externalizing their problems. There is no limit to their rage. And the last possibility, and I want to leave this open, the possibility that I am horrifically wrong, that I am a complete imbecile, and that they are the genuine heroes and I don't see it. And people like me are not giving them the credit they deserve. So maybe they're the heroes who are protecting the safety of Americans and the sanctity of our democracy. Maybe the surveillance they want of Clubhouse and whatever else is for our own good. And maybe they know something that I don't, and I am too stupid to understand it. And this is a quote from Glenn Greenwald. He wrote, U.S. journalists are not the defenders of free speech values, but the primary crusaders to destroy them. They do it in part for power, ideology, hubris, and petty vindictiveness. I guess I'm lucky in that way that I've somehow managed to avoid those kinds of people in my life or cut them out before I saw their vindictiveness. But I guess they're out there. I hope not to meet them ever. I do think Clubhouse is one of those companies that isn't going to miss their peak because so many investors are so hungry for something to put their money in that they're going to power it into the public markets before it starts to turn. A good example of a company that turned was Foursquare. So Foursquare had a bunch of offers to be acquired. I guess they didn't like the offers and they decided to stay independent, and they tanked. They tanked hard because Facebook put in their own check-in functionality and you didn't need to check in with a whole separate app and all your friends were already on Facebook. So it kind of took the wind out of their sails. And after that, they just became some weird data business, and they still are sort of around. I don't know anyone who uses it. That's a very dangerous game to play because once you turn and your growth plateaus, your valuations plummet, your prospects plummet, your money dries up, you are done. So these guys, I think, can get to the public markets potentially before they have to sell out to like a Facebook or a Twitter or a Microsoft for that matter, because you could make an argument that this business is a very good fit for LinkedIn. A lot of the Clubhouse stuff is either Bitcoin, VCs, tech, startup type people. And I'm sure it's going to diversify once they release the Android app and a bunch of the the unwashed masses like myself show up with our Android phones. It's going to probably change. But another way they can do it is through SPACs. And SPACs, in case you're not following it, basically it's a shortcut to go public. So someone creates a public company that has nothing in it but money, and then they use that money to buy a startup without that startup having to go through the scrutiny and the process of going public. So that's always possible. But it's interesting. There's a lot of options, and Clubhouse, that's the question. How does it scale, and what is that lifespan? And are people going to be able to neglect their kids for this long? I just wish someone could record the best of Clubhouse, put it into audio files, put those files on an RSS feed, and let me listen to them at 1.5 speed. So, I'm looking forward to it. And I know a lot of people are anxiously awaiting my arrival. I have a profile on some startup network. I don't remember the name of it. There's Quora, and then there's Product Hunt. And on the rare occasion I log into those things, I'll see that I have all these new followers. And I'm like, man, are these people waiting for me to say something interesting or important or to do something? Because I don't plan on it. I don't have the time. There's a lot of people waiting with bated breath. And luckily, you have me all to yourself. So lucky. And if you enjoy that, please join on Patreon and help out, be part of the movement. Help the McFuture grow. It's patreon.com/McFuture. And finally, comedian Tim Dillon is killing it on Clubhouse. He is doing the funniest work ever. He was able to take this platform and perfectly adapt it to his comedy. So he hosted a room called Should Women Own Bitcoin? And obviously it's ironic. Obviously it's satirical. And the women are all playing along. They think it's hilarious. So they're calling in, and one woman was like,
so here's what I was thinking. What if a woman could co-own a Bitcoin with her husband or her brother or father?
Interesting situation. Under male supervision, I think it can be allowed.
Yeah, like the Sharia law, like they do it in Saudi Arabia,
Yes. Sharia Bitcoin law seems to be a good way to go.
They were so smart, all of them, and everyone played along. So it almost became like an improv show where all of the participants were fellow improvisers along with Tim. Let's check it out on YouTube. It's brilliant. It just shows you how you can take something and repurpose it for your own use in a super creative way. And Tim's done it, so hats off to him. That's it for this episode. Thanks for joining. Don't forget, tell a friend, share it with others, and review the show on iTunes and all the other platforms if you can. And please join the Patreon. So much amazing stuff coming up, and support the show. You'll get tons of exclusives. You'll get more of me. I can't think of anything better. I mean, I've got a surplus and I am ready to share. Patreon.com/McFuture. That's it. See you next time on the McFuture.